According to the World Population Review, about 14% of the world's population is black, which is 7.8 billion. But despite having such a large population, they have always been discriminated against. There have been many atrocities on black people in history, however, nothing like this happens in today's world, right? It seemed like this to me too at first. But after doing a lot of research, I was surprised to find that even in today's time, there are very few countries where black people are not considered human beings. But I request you to watch the video till the end before reaching any conclusion. So in today's video we are going to show you top 10 countries where black people are not welcomed. But before starting the video, I want to request you, we put our best efforts to create our every single video. So please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's start. Number 10, Greece. Greece is considered the cradle of Western civilization, being the birthplace of democracy, Western philosophy, Western literature, historiography, political science, major scientific and mathematical principles, theater, and the Olympic Games. The exact number of black people in Greece is unknown, but it's estimated to be much higher than the 25,850 permanent residents from Africa reported in 2011. This is because many migrants from sub-Saharan Africa are undocumented. Greece, like many European countries, has struggled with issues of xenophobia and racism, particularly against migrants and refugees, including those from Africa and the African diaspora. This is especially true in the context of economic hardship and the rise of nationalist and far-right political movements, such as the Golden Dawn Party. Black people in Greece can face stereotyping in media and public life. Media portrayals are often limited and tend to emphasize negative stereotypes, which can contribute to broader societal discrimination. There have been reports of black people being treated as other or being excluded from mainstream Greek society, both socially and professionally. There have been reports of racial profiling and police harassment of black people, as well as other people of color, particularly those who are migrants or refugees. For example, black individuals in Greece have reported being stopped, searched, or questioned by police without cause, and there are accounts of physical violence and mistreatment. Black people, especially immigrants from African countries, can face discrimination when trying to find housing or work. Landlords and employers may refuse to rent to them or hire them based on their race. The job market for migrants, especially in lower-income sectors, can be quite difficult, and discrimination in hiring practices is an issue. In recent years, the Black Lives Matter movement and other global campaigns against racial injustice have started to influence attitudes in Greece, especially in urban areas like Athens, where there is a more visible and vocal activist community. This has led to some progress in challenging anti-black racism, although change is still slow. Number 9, United Arab Emirates. The United Arab Emirates is a country in the eastern part of the Arabian Peninsula, located on the southeastern coast of the Persian Gulf and the northwestern coast of the Gulf of Oman. The United Arab Emirates, like many countries in the Gulf region, has faced significant criticism for its treatment of migrant workers, including black people, particularly those from African nations. While the UAE does not have official laws that ban or specifically target black people, there are widespread issues of discrimination, racism, and exploitation faced by black individuals, especially migrant workers. There are reports that black people, especially African migrants, experience discrimination in both social and professional settings in the UAE. This is not necessarily unique to the UAE, but is part of broader trends seen in many Gulf countries, where racism and classism are often intertwined. Negative stereotypes about black people are sometimes prevalent in media and public discourse. These stereotypes can be linked to historical and colonial attitudes toward people of African descent, which still resonate in some parts of society today. African migrants, especially those working in low-wage jobs, may experience social exclusion and a lack of integration into the broader Emirati community, which is largely Arab and has a relatively homogeneous cultural identity. Black migrant workers, especially those from sub-Saharan Africa, often face racial segregation in housing. They may be forced to live in overcrowded, substandard conditions in labor camps or areas that are segregated from more affluent areas where Emiratis and wealthier foreigners live. In some cases, there have been reports of businesses, hotels, restaurants, clubs refusing to hire black people or treating them poorly based on their race. Racially motivated incidents of discrimination and harassment have been reported, both in the workplace and in social settings. There have been instances of anti-black racism in media and entertainment in the UAE, with some television programs, advertisements, or public figures perpetuating harmful stereotypes. Additionally, black individuals have sometimes been depicted in a subservient or inferior light in local media, which can contribute to broader societal prejudices. There have been efforts to reform labor laws in the UAE, especially in response to international criticism. The UAE has introduced some labor rights reforms in recent years, such as the introduction of a minimum wage for workers in the domestic sector and the relaxation of some aspects of the kafala system. The global Black Lives Matter movement has had some influence in raising awareness about racial issues in the UAE, but systemic racism remains a challenge. Number 8. Italy. Italy is known for its rich history, culinary treasures, and stunning landscapes. Whether it's the ancient ruins of Rome, the artistic masterpieces in Florence, or the serene beauty of the Italian lakes, there's always something remarkable to discover in Italy. Black people make up about 1.2% of Italy's population. Italy is 95% white, and black immigrants and their descendants make up about 1.5% of the population. They also make up about 38% of all migrants in Italy. Italy has had a complex and sometimes problematic history when it comes to issues of race and ethnicity, and there are significant challenges for black people in the country. While Italy does not have laws that explicitly target or ban black people, racism and discrimination especially against black people remain pervasive, particularly for migrants and individuals from African backgrounds. In Italy, racism toward black people is widespread, often manifesting as social exclusion, prejudice, and even violence. Many black individuals in Italy experience discrimination in public spaces, such as on public transport, in restaurants, or at social events. Black people are often stereotyped in media and society, and this contributes to their marginalization. Media portrayals of black people in Italy can reinforce negative stereotypes. These often include associations with criminality, poverty, or exoticism, and black people are sometimes portrayed as outsiders or immigrants rather than as part of Italian society. These stereotypes can perpetuate a sense of otherness for black Italians and migrants. There have been reports of racial profiling by police, with black people being more likely to be stopped, questioned, or searched by law enforcement, particularly in urban areas. Polls and surveys have shown that racism remains a significant issue in Italy, and anti-black sentiments are relatively common in public opinion, especially in some parts of the country. However, there is also a growing awareness of racism and racial inequality, especially among younger generations. Activism and advocacy around racial justice have become more visible, particularly in larger cities like Milan, Rome, and Naples. Number 7. South Korea. South Korea is known for many things, including its culture, technology, food, and natural beauty. As of 2019, there were 20,671 Africans living in South Korea, with 72.6% of them being men. Most Africans come to South Korea on student, business, or tourist visas, but often end up working illegally in the informal sector. South Korea is a relatively homogeneous society with a population that has historically been largely ethnically Korean. As a result, people of other racial or ethnic backgrounds, including black individuals, can face challenges in terms of social integration and racial discrimination. South Korea is one of the most ethnically homogeneous countries in the world, with over 95% of the population being ethnic Koreans. This cultural homogeneity has contributed to a limited understanding of racial diversity and a tendency to view people from different backgrounds, including black people, as outsiders. Black people in South Korea may be subject to harmful stereotypes, such as being associated with criminality, poverty, or subservient roles. These stereotypes are often rooted in ignorance and the lack of exposure to diverse cultures and backgrounds. While the country has made strides in becoming more open to international influences, there is still a level of racial prejudice, especially toward black people. Some individuals may view black people through the lens of Western media portrayals, which often exaggerate negative or simplistic stereotypes. Black expatriates or long-term residents in South Korea may experience social isolation. Since the majority of South Koreans have limited exposure to people of African descent, Black individuals can sometimes feel like they are treated as outsiders. Many foreigners in South Korea experience difficulty integrating into mainstream society, and Black people are no exception. Number 6. Kuwait. Located in the Middle East, Kuwait is a tiny but well-known country. Along with being famous for being oil-rich, Kuwait is also known for having several tourist attractions. People from all over the world love the ethnicity, culture, and cuisine of the country. Kuwait, like other Gulf countries, operates within a racial and ethnic hierarchy, where certain nationalities and skin tones are valued more than others. In this hierarchy, Black people, particularly African migrant workers, are often placed at the bottom. This is rooted in long-standing societal prejudices and stereotypes about race, which can affect Black people's treatment in both public and private life. While racism in Kuwait is not overt or codified in laws, discriminatory attitudes toward Black people are widely reported. Many Black people, especially those from sub-Saharan Africa, face prejudiced treatment in various settings, including in public spaces, schools, and workplaces. African migrant workers often face exploitation and abuse, including poor working conditions, low wages, and long working hours. The kafala system, which ties a migrant's residency and employment to their employer, has led to widespread human trafficking, forced labor, and lack of recourse for workers facing mistreatment. Many Black African women work as domestic helpers, where they can be particularly vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. Reports of physical and verbal abuse, as well as lack of freedom of movement or communication with family, are common. Kuwaiti media may perpetuate these stereotypes, particularly by focusing on negative portrayals of Black people or limiting their representation to certain roles, such as laborers or servants. Number 5. Japan. Japan is very famous for its unique blend of ancient traditions and modern innovations. Iconic elements include the stunning cherry blossoms, traditional tea ceremonies, samurai culture, and advanced technology such as bullet trains and robotics. Japan's anime and manga have also achieved worldwide popularity. There aren't many Black people in Japan. According to this link, there are 0.02% Black people in Japan. About 98% of Japan are Japanese, with only about 2% of the population being foreign. Japan is one of the most ethnically homogeneous countries in the world, with the vast majority of the population being of Japanese descent. As a result, there is limited direct exposure to racial diversity, which can contribute to a lack of understanding about race and an unfamiliarity with cultures outside of Japan's traditional social framework. This cultural homogeneity often leads to misunderstandings, racial ignorance, and stereotyping about people who are racially different from the norm, including Black people. Black people in Japan often face racial stereotypes, such as being seen as athletes, performers, or dangerous. These stereotypes are typically shaped by Western media depictions, which often reduce Black individuals to one-dimensional roles. In some cases, Black people may be viewed as exotic or unusual in a way that feels objectifying. Black people may be asked intrusive questions, such as, "Are you a basketball player?" or "Do you speak Japanese well?" Assumptions based on stereotypes rather than an understanding of the individual's background or experiences. Black people are largely underrepresented in Japanese media, and when they are represented, they may be portrayed in stereotypical ways, which can reinforce negative or superficial ideas about Blackness. Foreigners, including Black individuals, can sometimes find it difficult to fully integrate into Japanese society. The language barrier, cultural differences, and a lack of multicultural understanding can make it challenging for non-Japanese individuals to form deep social connections. Number 4. China. For centuries, China was much more advanced than most other countries in science and technology, astronomy, and maths. The Chinese invented paper, the magnetic compass, printing, tea porcelain, silk, and gunpowder, among other things. In 2020, there were an estimated 500,000 Africans living in China, with some 100,000 residing in Guangzhou, so most people in China have no or very few experiences with Black people. China does not have official or legal policies explicitly targeting Black people, but there are significant issues with racism, racial prejudice, and discrimination against Black individuals, particularly in the context of social attitudes, media portrayals, and the treatment of black people in both public and private spheres. As China is a relatively homogeneous society with a majority population of Han Chinese people, the country has had limited exposure to black people, leading to misunderstandings, stereotyping, and at times, overt discrimination. In China, black people are often associated with negative stereotypes, such as being poor, criminal, or uneducated. These stereotypes are largely influenced by media representations from the West and sometimes from Hollywood portrayals, which often reduce black people to roles like athletes, musicians, or criminals. Black people in China, especially foreigners, may experience social isolation due to cultural differences and the rarity of black individuals in many Chinese cities. In places where there are small expatriate communities like Beijing, Shanghai, or Guangzhou, black people can feel somewhat marginalized in social spaces, as they may be one of the few non-Asian faces in the crowd. Some black people in China have reported experiencing racialized behavior, where they are treated differently or more suspiciously than others. This includes being followed by store attendants, asked uncomfortable questions, or receiving unfriendly treatment in public spaces. Black people may also be subjected to racial profiling or assumptions that they are unusual simply due to their race. Number 3. United Kingdom. The UK is famous for its stunning castles, beautifully structured historical university buildings, football, and, of course, the classic fish and chips. The culture of the UK is very diverse, as the population is a mix of different generations. The black population in the United Kingdom was 4.2% of the population in 2021, or 2.4 million people. The UK has a complicated racial history tied to its colonial past, including its role in the transatlantic slave trade and the colonization of various parts of Africa, the Caribbean, and Asia. While the UK formally abolished slavery in 1833 and has since made progress in addressing racial inequality, the legacy of colonialism and the enslavement of Africans still impacts racial dynamics today. Many of the black communities in the UK, particularly in cities like London, Birmingham, and Manchester, trace their roots to the Caribbean and Africa, where historical ties to British colonialism played a key role in migration. The presence of these communities is a reminder of the country's colonial past, and tensions around race often arise from this history. Black people in the UK face significant challenges in the job market, including higher rates of unemployment and underemployment compared to their white counterparts. According to data, black British people, particularly those of African and Caribbean descent, are often overrepresented in low-wage jobs and underrepresented in leadership positions across various sectors. One of the most significant issues of racial inequality in the UK is the practice of stop and search, where black people are disproportionately targeted by police. Black people are far more likely to be stopped and searched than white people, often without reasonable cause. Number 2. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is considered both a regional and middle power. Since petroleum was discovered in the country in 1938, the kingdom has become the world's third-largest oil producer and leading oil exporter, controlling the world's second-largest oil reserves and the sixth-largest gas reserves. Saudi Arabia's racial dynamics are influenced by its history, which includes the Arab slave trade that took place from the 7th to the 20th centuries. Black Africans were often brought to the Arabian Peninsula as slaves. Although slavery was officially abolished in Saudi Arabia in 1962, the legacy of slavery has shaped societal views on race. Historically, there has been a racial hierarchy in Arab societies, with lighter-skinned Arabs often considered superior to darker-skinned people. Black people in Saudi Arabia, especially those of African descent, are sometimes viewed as being at the bottom of the social ladder. These attitudes continue to influence social interactions and prejudices today, even if they are not officially acknowledged. African migrant workers, particularly those from Ethiopia and Somalia, often face racial prejudice and poor treatment. They may be subjected to exploitation, poor living conditions, long working hours, and low wages. These workers, many of whom are black, are often seen as second-class citizens compared to migrant workers from countries like India or the Philippines, who are perceived more favorably. African migrants in Saudi Arabia may also face discrimination in terms of legal rights, including difficulties in securing residency, facing more frequent deportations, or being subjected to harsher working conditions compared to migrants from other parts of the world. Black people in Saudi Arabia may experience social exclusion or discrimination in various settings. For example, they may face challenges in integrating into social circles or may be treated with suspicion, particularly if they are perceived as foreign or part of a migrant group. While this prejudice is not always overt or violent, it is often subtle and can manifest in exclusion from high-status social or professional spheres. Number 1. Libya. The country is best known for its ancient Greek and Roman ruins and Sahara desert landscapes. Yes, Libya has a troubling history and ongoing issues with anti-black racism, which has been exacerbated by political instability and economic struggles, particularly following the 2011 civil war that ousted longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi. While racism against black people is not unique to Libya, the country's history, combined with internal conflicts, has led to severe discrimination and mistreatment of black people, both within Libya's borders and among migrants. Libya's history of colonialism under Italy from 1911 to 1943 and its legacy of racial tensions has contributed to negative attitudes toward black people. During the colonial era, the Italian authorities imposed racist policies that marginalized people of African descent, particularly in the south of the country. These historical divisions persist in modern Libya. Black people who are citizens of Libya, often from regions in the south or from mixed ethnic backgrounds, face widespread discrimination and social exclusion. They are often marginalized by the predominantly Arab population and face difficulties in areas such as employment, social status, and education. Black Libyans are often portrayed as inferior or are stereotyped as being linked to poverty, violence, or criminality in popular discourse. This racial prejudice affects their ability to secure equal treatment in society and contributes to the marginalization of black communities in Libya. Libya is a key transit country for migrants from sub-Saharan Africa who are trying to reach Europe. Due to Libya's geographic location and its role as a hub for people attempting to cross the Mediterranean Sea, black African migrants make up a significant portion of those who pass through the country. Many of these migrants, particularly from countries like Eritrea, Nigeria, Sudan, and Chad, face severe exploitation and abuse. They are often subjected to human trafficking, forced labor, and physical violence by both militias and local authorities. Migrants are frequently detained in inhumane conditions in Libyan prisons, where reports of torture, rape, and racist attacks are common. Black African migrants are particularly vulnerable to racist violence and discrimination. They are often treated as second-class citizens and scapegoated for crime or social unrest. There are reports of migrants being subjected to racial profiling, abusive policing, and exploitation by human traffickers, often with little protection from the state. The United Nations and various human rights organizations have condemned the treatment of migrants in Libya, especially the racist violence faced by black African migrants. In 2017, shocking footage emerged of black African migrants being sold as slaves in Libyan markets, further exposing the brutal and racist treatment of black migrants in the country. The European Union's reliance on Libya to stop migrants from crossing the Mediterranean Sea has been criticized for enabling the abuse and racism that migrants face in the country. European countries, while focused on controlling migration, have been accused of neglecting the rights and safety of black African migrants in Libya. Black people in Libya have little political representation and limited access to social services or economic opportunities. In both the public and private sectors, there are few opportunities for black Libyans to climb the social ladder, and racism can often play a significant role in limiting their opportunities for upward mobility. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.